All right, we're going to get going here. Hi, everybody. My name is Skylar, and welcome to this webinar presented by Influicity. Today is all about using data and podcast strategy to increase engagement. I'm going to take questions at the end of the presentation, so you can just pop them into your chat or into the Q&A tab, and we're going to get to those at the end, so just hang tight. Let's get going. There we go. Podcasts are the new trend in marketing, and plenty of brands are starting to engage in this space. But sometimes it's not as easy as we might make it look. Some shows have trouble getting off the ground or find that they have difficulties attracting their target audience. Some podcasts never manage to find their groove and peter out. But why? One of the main problems that we've identified in podcasts specifically that fail is a lack of a clear, detailed listener persona. Every brand has an ideal customer profile. It's kind of part and parcel of marketing. And the same concept can be applied to content. This information lets you get insights into who your podcast is made for and how to cater to them to create a meaningful relationship. The cornerstone of modern marketing initiatives is data. Companies are constantly seeking new ways to track and observe current and future customers in order to create more powerful campaigns that drive people towards buying their products and services. And historically, this data has been purely demographic. Customers are arranged by gender, race, age, economic status, and other information that's fairly easy to procure. But as brands are beginning to get more creative with their marketing and employing content as a vehicle to meet their needs, other types of data are starting to become more important. The two categories that are really coming to the forefront now are behavioral data and psychographics. In this session, we're going to talk about why these two types of data are so important for podcasting specifically, how to apply them to your podcasting strategy to build a better listener persona, and how to collect the data that is going to change the way you podcast for the better. The idea behind creating an accurate listener persona is simple, but often misunderstood. In the past, many companies shied away from creating content that was too personalized. Marketing was built to reach as many people as possible to give companies the greatest chance of generating leads and sales. It was a sort of throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks approach. And in the age where TV commercials and magazine ads were king, it worked. However, marketing in the digital age is very different. Because attention economies are so competitive in today's advertising spaces, many brands have shifted their focus towards more personalized content. People just want to feel something. They want to look at a brand and think, that's meant for me. Brands need to resonate on a deeper level with their consumers, and this resonation needs to be totally cohesive, included in every touch point from advertisement to checkout. And content that isn't personalized in some way can't strike those chords. If it's built for everyone, it probably won't resonate with anyone. This is where a detailed, accurate listener persona becomes so important. Knowing who your content is meant for on an intimate level is what enables brands to create podcasts and other content that will be successful before they even launch it. And that's where psychographics come in. This is probably the point in the presentation where you're starting to ask, what are psychographics? According to Merriam-Webster, psychographics can be defined as market research or statistics classifying population groups according to psychological variables, such as attitudes, values, or fears, and the variables or trends identified through such research. Now, the most common type of data used in creating listener personas is demographics. In contrast with psychographics, these data points are objective physical attributes like age, gender, race, and location. If you can find it on a driver's license, it's probably demographic data. They're things that someone is, not something that they do. And these data points are valuable in their own right. Knowing what age group and gender your listeners fall into is important for creating your marketing strategy. But creating your listener persona with nothing but demographic data can result in a profile that's too generic. And there are even more problems when it comes to podcasts. According to data gathered by multiple podcasting networks, podcast audiences are notoriously diverse and hard to pin down to a specific profile. Listeners run the gamut for age, gender, race, economic status, and location because podcasts lack limiting factors such as TV access, cable subscriptions, or pricing. This makes profiles based solely on demographic data a grave misstep in the podcasting world. They're often too narrow for the medium, severely limiting the potential that your podcast has for reaching an audience big enough to justify its creation. The fix for this is psychographics. Psychographics are different because they're more concerned with listener psychology and behavior than tangible attributes. The data is geared towards a listener's personality, values, principles, and most importantly, their motivations. The listener persona that you have the potential to create is a lot more fleshed out and capable of superseding the demographically limited profiles that were used for marketing historically. Your listeners are united by their habits and personalities rather than by a set of static traits. While we are highly recommending that you add psychographics to your marketing strategy, we are not at all implying that you should throw out your demographic data completely. We've stated previously that demographics are valuable in their own right. They're helpful in determining what sort of content you should include in your podcast and are the backbone of the creation process. However, adding psychographics to the mix helps you personalize your podcast strategy and elevate your podcast goals and topic selection. It helps you visualize your listener persona as a real person with real motivations and values and cater to them accordingly. It's easy to create content that resonates with people if you know exactly how they feel about your topic, what they're hoping to get out of your content, and what motivates them to interact with your brand. Content that is built to entertain, in particular, tends to be driven more by psychographic data than by demographic data. Thus, it's better not to think about this process as demographics versus psychographics, and I know it's up on my slide, but hear me out here. They need to work together to create the best results for your podcast. In the simplest terms, demographics attract your audience and psychographics make them come back for more. Some companies are apprehensive about collecting psychological data from their prospects because they believe that it's difficult to get. However, psychographic data is most often gleaned from behavioral data, and that can be collected from the tracking cookies that you've probably already got all over your website and your social media. Data points like the devices that your audience typically uses to access the content, their click-through rates, and the times and locations where they listen can all be converted into psychographic data via inference. Many companies are already collecting as much behavioral data as they can get their hands on because it's incredibly valuable to marketers. It gives you a full picture of the journey that your consumers take from advertisement to checkout. And you can collect this data from content as well. Knowing how long someone will usually watch a YouTube video and at what time of day, for example, is valuable insight into their habits and what drives them towards your content. The process of converting raw behavioral data into psychographics is where you start creating the ever-important category of customer intelligence, the data powerhouse that fuels every marketing campaign currently running today. There are two ways that behavioral data is generally collected: via company-driven methods, such as tracking cookies, and via self-reported methods, such as surveys and social media surveillance. While both can provide valuable data, the data that you gather from company-driven methods is actually much more accurate than self-reported methods. As humans, we are terrible at predicting and quantifying our own behavior because we tend to make most of our decisions in the moment without prior planning. We can pollute data collection methods, such as surveys, with false beliefs about our behavior and motivations. But data gathered in real time while we browse a website or a podcast library doesn't lie. Once you've gathered your data, many experts suggest segmenting your audience by their location to better understand the differences between cultures or lead sources and run campaigns in different areas based on their needs and interests. You can use the resulting segmented data to build up your listener persona and formulate strategies that add incredible value to your podcast before it even launches. Now that we've covered what psychographics are and why you need them, let's talk about how you can use this data to create a more effective, long-lasting podcast. As you develop your ideal listener persona, it can inform how you're going to make your show stand out. After all, there are over 4 million podcasts, million with an M, currently in circulation. And those slight differences matter when you're trying to create meaningful connections with your audience. The aim of creating an ideal listener profile is to be able to essentially fine-tune your podcast's topic and themes. You should be able to create a short elevator pitch that will instantly ring a bell in them and make your show a compulsive listen. Knowing what motivates your listeners to click on the play button in the first place can help you craft a show's title, description, title card, and content in a way that will attract the kind of people you're trying to reach. Some marketing experts believe that having a fully fleshed out listener persona for a podcast can increase your chances of attracting a valuable, engaged audience by a factor of 10. Because psychographic data often gives you a direct look into the motivations and needs of your audience, you can use this insight to fine-tune the content and marketing plan for your podcast and give it a better chance of success. The psychographic data you include in your ideal listener persona can help you narrow down your topics, determine the length of your episodes and the frequency at which you release them, and many more factors that you can use to narrow down your show's format, style, and even details like who your host should be to maximize the value that your audience can get from your content. Knowing your audience's motivations and catering to them also increases the chances that the listeners that you do attract will recommend your podcast to friends and family that share those psychographic traits. Everyone knows how valuable word of mouth is to the marketing world, and this technique can help you turn your show into a word of mouth machine. Now that we've gone through all of this theory and data for you, it's time to take it for a test drive. We're going to pull back the curtain and show you how your listener persona and the psychographic data that helped you create it can make a big difference in how you plan your podcast. We do a lot of business podcasts at Influicity, so we're going to use that industry as our starting point. Business podcasts can range widely in format and focus, so we're going to need a little bit more data before we can really make a show that will shine. So let's pick out some demographic data as a skeleton. This is Jane. She represents a proposed target audience for our new podcast. She's a woman in the 35 to 44 age bracket who lives in Canada or the United States. She's upper middle class and works in a B2B industry like marketing. So what does this data tell us about our podcast? Well, it tells us that we want to gear our potential guest roster towards women in business, that we can cover topics related to investment and building a business because that type of activity could be viable for Jane due to her economic status, and that we should focus on B2B strategies rather than B2C, so business to business rather than business to customer, because she's already familiar with that industry. This is valuable information to have, but it's still a very broad profile of a podcast and probably won't resonate as deeply as we want it to. But what happens if we add the psychographic and behavioral data that we have on Jane? Through the strategies we just discussed, we discover that Jane listens to podcasts in short bursts, some in the morning and some in the afternoon, most likely on a commute. These bursts are about 20 minutes long. We discover that she's taken an interest in building an investment portfolio and favors podcasts that are focused on building wealth. Additionally, many of the podcasts that Jane already listens to are hosted by other women who are established financial experts and entrepreneurs. Now, we know that we need to create a show that's hosted by an influential woman with expertise in the business world. We can focus on topics such as investing techniques and wealth management, with an emphasis on building a portfolio and increasing your net worth. And we know that our episodes need to be short so that they can easily fit into Jane's busy schedule. See the difference? We went from creating a vague idea for a podcast to a fully fledged concept, all because we understood Jane and her motivations more effectively. This is the power of a listener persona in podcasting. It ensures that shows find their niche and get into the limelight that's perfect for their goals. In the end, psychographics are just another example of how incredibly valuable data can be in the marketing industry. Creating a detailed listener persona helps you ensure that your podcast will reach the right people and makes your future marketing endeavors much easier. And as data collection technology evolves, we're excited to see what new heights these innovative techniques will reach. And that's the end. Thank you guys so much for listening to my little chat today. Do we have any questions here? I'm not seeing any coming in. And if you do think of a question later, absolutely contact us. You can email us at success@influicity.com. Thank you guys so much for coming to see me today. If you liked this webinar, make sure you check us out on our social media channels. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn. And if you really, really like us and you want to help us out, make sure you share this with a friend or a colleague as well. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.